Good afternoon and welcome to the channel, Pascal.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's great to have you here. To introduce you, Pascale Mayer is a translator, communications coach, and lived experience practitioner. Pascal began as a coach for migrants and refugees back in 2013, specialised in helping medical and legal professionals to re enter the labour market. She has since worked with a variety of clients, switching from cheerleader to drill sergeant and cracking the proverbial whip when the time arises. Pascal has followed an unconventional path in life and describes herself as a thinking partner, a loneliness companion, and a hope enhancer who helps people to flourish emotionally. I met Pascal as a fellow delegate on the Coaching Leaders in Times of Crisis course with Animas, and we've since connected over a shared love for coaching and a passion for enhanced communication. So, Pascal, I'd love to start by asking you if you can tell us a little bit more about the coaching that you do now, and what you enjoy the most about it.
Well, thank you, David. What a lovely introduction. Yes, as you mentioned, I started with perhaps a very practically focused coaching on getting people integrated into a new living situation, getting them fit for the labor market. So there was a lot of role playing, interviewing preparation, language learning. So very practical things. And then what I am doing now, or what I am moving more towards, is more of a perhaps mental health coaching. That's what I would call it. Um, the reason being that in my youth, I had different problems that I was struggling with. For example, an eating disorder, depression, and I had various experiences with therapy, with coaching, with theater, with a variety of different things that have helped me, but also experiences that I think could have been much better that were either not helping me or were even making it worse. So back then already, this is already 35, 40 years ago, I thought one day, if I am well enough and I feel resilient enough and I feel strong enough, I would want to help people who might be going through this or similar experiences. I would like to be that person that is there for them, so they don't feel alone and they can muster up the strength within themselves to get through this. So there is quite a change in the style of coaching and um yes, in the style of coaching and also in the methods, the skills involved.
Thank you so much for sharing, Pascal. So, you mentioned that in your journey from 35 years ago and more recently, you've had support from therapists, from coaches, and other professionals. And I'm curious as to what led you to choosing to become a coach.
A great question. Oh boy, how much time do we have? Because it's been quite uh
An
my
unconventional path.
yes, it has, very much so, and not always because of my choosing. I think the best way I can describe it is I've tried to play the cards I was dealt. I've always had plans or ideas or dreams, and some of the times they have worked out, most of the times they haven't. And then the secret was to just, you know, deal with what the situation is and try to make the best of it. And through that, something else might happen for you, might present itself, a chance might present itself. So I started out studying, maybe I'll focus on my academic background, has nothing to do with coaching. It was international relations and international law. And as a hobby, I started out acting as a hobby and also as a way of therapy, actually. And those two I found went very well together. And I really had a very hard time to make up my mind after I graduated which direction I would go. And I was headed to the United Nations and I wanted to make international relations a career. And then it didn't quite work out. There was a problem with the papers. It didn't really go smoothly. And I thought, well, the theater is open, it's waiting. I had an invitation for a fantastic training program on Broadway. And I thought, since this is all laid out for me right now, I'm gonna seize that opportunity and go with that. And it was a wonderful experience. Um, Maybe the most wonderful time in my life. And the thing was then, how do you survive financially? How can you survive in a city like New York City, Manhattan? In the 90s, it was already very expensive. Not nearly as it is today, but it was already a struggle to be able to live there on your own, making money as an actor. So I found a second career. I got into hospitality management by chance, really by chance. This was almost a miracle. I walked off the street into a fantastic working relationship with the Four Seasons company in New York, and I became a concierge. So I got to know New York City in a very special way. Everything was open to me, all the culture, all everything, just everything. And another wonderful experience that I didn't plan for. It happened. And then I got sick. And that's when I would say, I my thinking became, it's difficult to put it into words, maybe deeper and more inward rather than looking outward at what can I do? What can I do? What can I be? What can I become? It was, it was very much about survival. I was very sick. And it was my priorities just changed completely. Then I had a change of, scenery. I had to leave the United States. I came back to Germany where my family was, and, my illness didn't really get any better. It was a long journey of recovery, and once it seemed like one chapter was closing, the next chapter was opening. It wasn't the same disease, it was something new, but still, it was an ongoing struggle, and I had difficulties, and we're talking over 10 years, a period of 10 years. I had a really hard time trusting my body, trusting myself, um, and that's when I started thinking, I want to be doing something that is more intimate, that is more focused on helping others, but also to help myself. So it was a big, long time of change, and like I said, or like you said, in 2013, I started coaching refugees and migrants, and that was something that someone just asked me, "Hey, wouldn't you like to, German, English, and communication, and wouldn't you like to coach these people who are new to the country and who need a lot of help in finding their place and in keeping hope alive." And I thought, wow, what a great opportunity. And that's how I came to coaching first. And then from there, it just developed into different direction. And I'm still not sure if I am on a straight path to whatever it is I'm might be thinking one day or another. It might just be that I'm on an ongoing journey, and we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Pascal, for that whistle stop tour.
And that was long.
And it could have been much longer, but that was just the highlights reel, really. Um, we had a great conversation before the call, before the interview today, about keeping hope alive, and I'm curious as to how you kept hope alive through your journey, through all the challenges that you faced, and how you help help those refugees and migrants to keep hope alive against just unthinkable sort of hardships and challenges that they are facing.
Mhm. So for me personally, on top of the physical disease that I was struggling with, there was depression again because I doctors couldn't help me. Doctors weren't sure what it was, and it took a long time to find the cause and the root of my health problems. And so in that time, as I said, there was a lot of doubt, a lot of if you don't know what you're dealing with, it can be incredibly frustrating to focus on the road ahead because you're concerned about, well, if I don't know what I'm dealing with, I don't know what to do to make it better, right? So in this period of loneliness, of despair, of uncertainty, for me personally, my biggest fountain of strength was my faith. And this was something that I wasn't raised in a religious way. I'm not a member of a church. Um, this was something I experienced for the first time when I was in treatment for my eating disorder, when I was anorexic. And the program that I was so fortunate to be in was a mixture of therapy by psychotherapists and also therapy by people who were themselves addicts. Either they were anorexic and bulimic, eating disordered, or different addictions, drug addicts, alcohol addicts. I mean, the whole spectrum, because what I learned there was that it's all basically the same disease. The symptoms are different, but whether you're not eating or overeating or drinking or having sex excessively, it all is the same. There's something at the root of it which causes you to behave in that way. And in that program, I learned about the 12 steps. And step number one was to admit that you were powerless and that you had no control over your life and that you were handing your control over to a higher power. And for me, that higher power became God. So it was my relationship to God that in those difficult times gave me the strength and gave me meaning. Even though you can't move, even though you're in pain, even though you can't work, I thought, even though all of these things, there's got to be still a reason that I'm here. And I can't give up. I've got to move forward and I can't lose hope. So that was what did it for me. And later in coaching refugees and migrants from different religions, different parts of the world, we never talked about God or Christianity or anything that might be excluding someone. So everyone knew what I believed, and it 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 wasn't important. What was important was the common experience of feeling safe, because that was something that they had lost, and that was an experience they were rediscovering through community, through communication, through just being open and being there. And I think that's what, in a nutshell, really in a nutshell, that's what made the experience so valuable for myself and for my students, coachees, and for the people that I was very lucky to work with.
Mm, thank you, Pascal. The question that's on the top of my head is if there's if someone's listening and thinking, well, you know, if there's someone that's in a desperate position with different desperate circumstances and they're in an extremely unfortunate position, situation, and kind of they're really struggling, you know, surely how would surely a life coach talking about goals and opportunities and visions and values for the future, surely that's the last person they need to help them. And in fact, they need therapists, they need maybe medication, or people like recruiters who can help them find a job. You know, I'm interested in sort of dispelling that myth that life coaching is just about helping someone who's in, say, this job to get to the next job up. Someone that's got it all together and is wanting to get to the next level. And I'm curious as to how coaching can help in a very different way to that.
Mhm. Mhm. I think what was important for me was at the time I didn't see myself as a coach. I didn't have a definition for what I was doing. Perhaps the most fitting definition at the time that I was seeing myself as was a language teacher. But I did so much more. I mean, we spent so much time together. We were in a classroom, but then I invited people to my home. We went out, we went to the theater, we went to pub quizzes, we went for walks. They did artwork with me. There was so much going on, which was beyond the classroom. And I think it was my honest, authentic interest in them as people, no matter where you come from, no matter what your beliefs are. What I'm interested in is having a relationship, sharing experience, um, talking, listening, celebrating life in in the smallest things, like a poem. I would bring poems into our lessons, and these were people that German is a hard language to learn, and these were people with barely any pre knowledge of this new language that they had to immerse themselves in. And I would bring poems that weren't, let's say, that weren't something that you would do with children on a very basic level. They were quite challenging. Even for a native speaker of German, they were challenging poems. And what it was about for me was I wanted to meet them on an emotional level. So even things just like listen to the sound of the language, see what it does with you. What do you feel when you hear that sound? Can you see pictures when you listen to the words? Rather than understanding the meaning of what the writer meant when he, you know. So it was about being together and experiencing language together and allowing feelings. And because we were constrained to few words, it really wasn't so much about talking about feelings. It was more about feeling feelings together. And out of this maybe playful or artful way of just being together, um, grew a sort of trust and openness that then allowed for much better learning, which maybe didn't even feel like learning, but it just felt like it's happening. It's just happening by being together and experiencing together. So it was quite a remarkable, um, remarkable experience. Because in a lot of ways, I have the feeling that in my life things have gone always backwards. I started coaching these people. I started language teaching these people, and afterwards, I got training and coaching. Afterwards, I got my certification for CELTA, which is the Certificate of English Language Teaching. So it was, I did first, and then I learned about it because I had this urge to maybe to fill these little gaps where I thought, well, I can't really be doing this because I didn't learn it. And in fact, I was already doing it. And then I was filling in the academic blanks afterwards.
Mm. Thank you for that. I love the way you described. I think you said coaching almost as an artful way of being together.
Yeah.
Really like that
Oh, yeah.
definition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would definitely emphasize the art part and the craft part. I believe coaching is an art and it's a craft. And it really doesn't matter if you're trained in it, if you're accredited, if you've written books about it, if you've had 2,000 hours of experience. I've met people that I've worked with, fellow coaches, who've had 20 hours of experience. And I felt that they were amazing coaches. And I've been coached by people who've had 20 years of experience, and I was very disappointed in my experience with them. So I think it's something that you can't really it can't really be measured by training, academia, whatever. It's such a personal, intimate, subjective experience between two people that just happens. And if it's right, it's magic. And if it doesn't, it's disappointing. But I find it very difficult. And of course there are merits to accreditation and merits to training. I've had training and it was wonderful. So of course you learn things, but I think there's this whole debate about empathy, for example, being learned. I don't believe it can be learned. I am an absolutely fervent um, believer that empathy cannot be learned. Perhaps empathic behavior can be learned, but I think empathy, which is perhaps the major pillar of coaching, is something that is rooted deep within you. It's perhaps a gift that you're given, and it comes out of an experience, I believe, that's connected to suffering. Um, Not everyone who suffers is empathetic, but I believe that everyone who has true empathy has had their fair share of suffering in life. Um, so I believe there are certain things that can be learned, behavior can be learned, but this innate empathy, it's either there or it's not. I do believe that it can grow, that it is something that can grow. Um, but there are so many studies on this. We know, for example, from medical studies that the medical profession, in the more you study, the more empathy decreases. There have been studies on this, and it's very interesting because then people who are in the medical profession have to relearn empathetic behavior with patients because it's so important to relate to the patient. On the other hand, it's also important in a way to be desensitized, right? As a doctor, as a police officer, as a judge, you are dealing with very specific problems on a daily basis that require you to keep calm. There's it's fascinating. It's fascinating. I'll stop there. I'll go off
Wow.
on a tangent.
There's so much in there I'd like to dive into. I mean, you said earlier, Pascal, just about the importance as coaches we are of being with someone where they're at, and it reminded me of how one of the principles of coaching is to treat your client with unconditional positive regard. And while we have these principles and we have tools and techniques that we can use, um, also, as you said earlier, there's room for so much creativity within coaching. And I'm curious as to how have your past experiences influenced your style of coaching now?
hmm Um, I'll go back to 2013 when I first started coaching the refugees and migrants. Um, One technique or one kind of mm, method that I used extensively, for example, was role playing or theatrical elements, gestalt elements that now I know it's gestalt. Back then it was theater, the empty chair, those kind of exercises. Um, they were very familiar to me because I had done them in theater training, and they were there to build trust, to open up, and they're wonderful tools. And they helped me when I was a student of the theater, but also when I was deep in a depression. That's what that was a part of what got me out. And so, role playing in that coaching setting where people needed to integrate into a new culture, to be fit to do jobs, to go into the labor market, role playing was wonderful because it was a very practical tool to prepare them for an interview situation. But we not only used it in that way, we also used it in a way where we wanted to be there for each other, build trust, have openness, and like I said before, feel feelings rather than just talk about, which I think is that is, that is something that's very important to me, and where I sometimes feel like we are in a process of maybe taking a wrong turn. Where we come from a mentality of don't talk about your feelings, don't feel your feelings, just clench your teeth and close your eyes and go through. And now we're moving, or we're there already. I don't know. I have no idea because I don't know what the future holds. But we're in a process where it's become much more open. You can talk about your feelings. You're encouraged to feel your feelings and all of that. I'm afraid that we are at a point where we're just talking way too much about talking about feelings, and we're talking about feeling feelings, and we're not allowing actually to do it. So, that Nike phrase, just do it. Well, just do it, just feel it. But we're talking about it, and rather than feeling it. And in certain ways, I think that we are not encouraging people to feel feelings or to stay with feelings. We're encouraging people to say, you know what? You don't have to stand up to that stuff. You can say, no, that's it. I don't want to hear this. I don't want to deal with this. We are encouraging a kind of behavior that I think is not necessarily helpful, because sometimes you're in a situation where there is no way out. You got to sit with what you're in. There is no solution. There is no quick fix. You got to sit, and you got to be in the moment. There is no escape. And with feelings, I feel it's the same thing. Sometimes you just have to. You just have to sit with the feeling. And sometimes I think we are shying away from that. We're talking an awful lot about it, but we're not actually practicing what we're preaching. So that concerns me. And I'm going to pause, but I'm going to also say that COVID was a perfect chance to perhaps look at that problem in a deeper way. And I think it's not too late, but I think we're missing it.
I agree, Pascal. My personal experience of trying to think my way through things or talk my way through things has been not always successful, and it reminds me of sort of a Chinese finger trap analogy. From my own experience of trying to pull against feelings, for example, of frustration, the harder you pull, the harder it pulls back, and it almost adds fuel to the fire. It gets worse and worse and worse. Versus sitting down and literally giving the frustration a voice and hearing it, feeling it, going, okay, I'm going to really feel this frustration now, and I'm going to, you know, think about it, talk about try and vent it, do something with it, let it feel heard, versus trying to suppress it. Now, I found out about this about the same time I read a book called The Happiness Trap about CBT and about the importance of not trying to suppress our feelings, but like letting them out. And I found the more that I give that frustration a voice, the more I let it be heard and felt, kind of the quicker it reduces its power. It doesn't go away, but it reduces its like hold on me, so that then I acknowledge it for what it is and literally take a big breath, sigh of relief, and start to move on from it, or at least or see it from a different perspective.
Mhm. I agree. Sometimes that's being seen as being self-indulgent, right? And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about people going around and screaming on the top of their lungs out in the streets. I'm this, I'm that. It's not necessary. That's not what I mean. I mean, just like you described, right? Sitting with a feeling and being aware that there is feeling in the first place, and talking it away, or talking on the contrary, maybe too much about it, has almost the same effect as talking not at all, talking about it. It doesn't really give you a chance to experience what's going on. And I think a large part of society is going in a direction or pushing for a direction where that is that's happening. And I'm not sure there is a lot of awareness about this. What I meant, for example, with the chance with COVID is this forced isolation, this forced just sitting with yourself and being alone, being lonely. It's awful. It's an awful experience, but it can be so incredibly useful as well. Why did we not take the chance and say, you know what, we're all in the same boat here. We're all, to various degrees, experiencing loneliness, isolation, and all of these things that have these negative connotations, of course. But why aren't we, now that this situation is unavoidable, looking at it in a way that can serve us? Why not say, oh my God, my child hasn't been able to go and play with his friends for 3 months? Why didn't we say, well, then let's look at what they can do on their own? Like, go back to basics. Learn what it is to be by yourself. Learn what it is you have within yourself that can fuel, m- that can bring about things that are useful and beneficial and positive and teach you skills for the future. That's what I mean. And there's an awful lot. You said before, this frustration, that you have, and that if you don't deal with it, it gets bigger. Um, a lot of this also, I think, has to do with language. If you put labels on something, it can make it much worse. And so we have to be very careful about how we're naming things. If you saw a movie last night that really made you upset, you might say the next day, you might say, "Oh, I saw this movie last night and I'm traumatized." No, you're not. No, you're not. If you're upset, you might be sad, you might feel frustrated, you might feel disgusted, you might feel a number of things, but you're probably not traumatized from one movie, right? But it's this carefree, careless um, use of language sometimes that I feel is also something that we should be mindful of. It can also lead to pathologizing certain things. Like, you're sad, you're sad. You have a right to be sad. You cry. It's an experience that is human and that will happen all the time in your life. It's not necessarily that you're depressed. So many times I hear people say, "Oh God, I'm so depressed." No, you're probably not. Depression is a serious disease. And just because you're sad for very specific reasons doesn't necessarily mean that you're depressed. Or if you hear people say, "Oh my God, I've got my keys, I have Alzheimer's." No, you don't. You just forgot your keys. So it's these kind of things that I think are um yeah, I don't mean to be the speech police at all, but it's just things that I'm concerned about sometimes.
Mm. There's a book I read recently on Stoic philosophy, and a line that really stuck with me. I can't remember who I attempt to remember who said it, but it was along the lines of all of man's problems stem from his inability to sit alone with his thoughts, and the other thing that came up for me as you were talking, on the fantastic trauma course that we are both on at the moment with Animas, there's a lot of work going on in the sort of the body coaching space. So there's Bessel van der Kolk with his famous "The Body Keeps the Sport" score book, and then there's also there's a style of coaching, I forget the name of it, but it involves literally asking your client, where is this frustration in the body? Where is what you are feeling? Might not be frustration, might be another feeling or emotion. Where is it sitting in the body, in order to help them to recognize it and be able to unpack it and then eventually move past it.
Mhm. Yep, I agree. I love that quote. The inability to sit with his own thoughts. Yep. Mhm. I agree. It's a big, I mean, in these times where there is something going on all the time, um, it's very difficult to find a moment to tune everything out and be with your own thoughts. It is difficult. So again, that is it's a tremendous chance if you know if you have the opportunity to sit with your own thoughts. You might not like what you're hearing, but it it's very useful and it can be very healing.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We're in a world that's more connected than ever before, but people are feeling more disconnected than ever before. And I know that I think certain countries are looking at banning social media at certain minimum ages, and it'd be interesting to see how the world changes in terms of what we're talking about over the next few months and years. Um, but speaking of challenges, you've mentioned some of your own personal challenges, and I'm curious as to your professional challenges as a coach with gaining accreditation and sort of your journey with CPD.
Hmm. Yes, like I said, uh, accreditation. I might be one of the few people who are speaking against accreditation. I'll try to explain why. I think accreditation is fantastic in theory. In practice, I think there are lots of problems because number one, it suggests if you have an acronym behind your name, right, that that there's something more than other people can offer. You've went through a process of tests and of assessments, and you've met all of these criteria, and that suggests that you are better at people who haven't gone through that process. Um, I just like I said, the same thing about training or academia or having been the author of a book. I can understand how this suggests more learnedness, more experience, and all of that. But in reality, it doesn't necessarily. And I have to go back again to the experience of coaching being a very intimate personal one between two people. So the thing with accreditation, I think you're it's a very I'm struggling not to be too negative about it, but I'm also I think I should be frank in my choice of words. So it's a money machine, right? You are accredited, and then in order to stay accredited, you need to pay more money to take more tests, to take more CPD, and all of this. It's an ongoing. It's ongoing. I liken it sometimes to the Michelin stars. People have to pay to keep their Michelin stars, and it's not necessarily that you're the best restaurant if you have 3 stars. There are cooks that are fantastic that don't have a single star. And coming from in one of my past lives, having been a concierge in the super luxury hotel industry in New York City, yeah, Michelin stars were a big thing. And I often had to tell my clients, well, don't bother going there because it's not the experience you might expect. Go there. They don't have stars, but I can promise you the best food you've ever had. So it's subjective. It's about your personal experience that you have with another person. And while yes, accreditation is great idea, great concept on paper, in theory, it's for my understanding, it's not all it's cracked up to be in practice. And people should just be mindful of that. I think the best way to know whether you're getting a good coach is to get a free call and have an honest conversation with the person you are considering working with and see if there is chemistry between you. See if you think you can trust this person. See if you like this person. I mean, this is very important, much more important than a degree or an acronym behind your name. So while I see the merit in accreditation uh, for certain people, I have to say that I'm very skeptical. Also because there is not that much control. You have to submit a list of um, of names or of hours that you've coached. nobody controls, nobody verifies. So, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I remain
true.
skeptical.
It's yeah, and everyone's valid to their own opinion. I think with an unregulated industry at the moment, unregulated, anyone can call themselves a coach. And remember a course I went on recently with Animas, and one of the trainers said, the most qualified, the most certified coach is exactly that. They are the most qualified coach. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best coach, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're right for you. And that chemistry with typically what you should hopefully establish with a chemistry call with a coach, um, it has to exist. And sometimes a newly qualified coach who hasn't got accreditation or any additional certifications yet might be the perfect coach for you. And equally, it might end up being someone who's been coaching for 15, 20 years and is accredited by all three organizations at a very senior level. So I guess it's swings and roundabouts. It's personal preference as a client and also as a coach, as certain coaches will have different preferences to different accreditation companies as well. But for me, what was most important was choosing to take an accredited course. And the time I chose Animas, it was the only course that was accredited by all three of the major um, bodies in the world of coaching. Um, Speaking of which, I know that you have been on, I think now a couple of Animas courses, and I am interested in what led you to Animas and what your experiences have been in training with Animas.
Mhm. I loved the Animus course because, and this is going to sound so uh, silly, but there is a little preface that a moderator in a course at Animus always brings. And it is, we are extending an invitation to you to pick and choose what rings true to you. We are presenting you with a variety of viewpoints from different experts, right? And I'm doing this because, again, it's the same thing about what is an expert? Is an expert someone who has this accreditation, who has this studied for 50 years, who has all of these hours? Or is an expert someone who might have the lived experience? There are many definitions, but that's exactly what Animas brings to the table. There are so many viewpoints and so many individuals who are presenting their unique experience and point of view on a certain subject that I feel so enriched. I feel wonderful if I hear something that I already believe, because then I feel reinforced in my beliefs, and I feel equally enriched by people who are coming with a viewpoint that I had never even considered, or that I might have been completely against. Maybe they can convince me, maybe they can't. Either way, I get something out of every experience I have, because in the beginning they are letting me know it is an invitation. Um, I've had other CPDs where people were very, how can I say, well, here is my wealth of experience and I've got it all figured out. And if you don't get it, that's too bad, because you get out of my course what you put in. So there was no accountability. There was no responsibility on the part of the trainer. It was all given to me, where I feel like, no, I don't agree. I think you have to bring certain things, like there has to be signposting, there has to be a certain structure, there has to be a certain passion about what you're presenting for me to enjoy what I'm seeing, what I'm learning. So there is a lot that the presenter has to bring. It's not all about, you know, the person sitting there. I do realize that we're not going into CPD just sitting back and getting entertained. We are there with a purpose, right? We want to learn something. We want to grow. We want to experience something in community with other coaches or other people from uh, this spectrum of professions. And that's what I like about IMAS. It's very open and it's very varied. and it never ever gave me the impression of being uh, being taught or preached the one thing that is all true. It was always very clear that this was an invitation and a presentation um, and that I could take from it what I thought was valuable for me.
I'm glad to hear you've had such a positive experience. I agree. There's having taken a non-coaching course, but a very different course at a top 10 university in the UK. I remember sort of feeling um, spoken at for sort of an hour and told this is the way, and you must learn it. Versus that engaging experience with lots of audience participation, lots of debates, and speakers acknowledging even sometimes that what I'll talk about might contradict what someone else on the series of course trainings might say. But so therefore we would invite you to take from it, you know, what you'll take from it. So your interpretation of this course is valid to each of you. And I mean, into these courses, there's built, there's the consolidation sessions and there's breakout rooms. There's lots of audience participation. There's the chat's always really interesting. So that I find that the experience with the other delegates as interesting as what the speakers' presentations.
Absolutely. Yeah, David, I completely agree. Um, equally, equally valuable. It's the whole package that I very much appreciate. Yep. And like you, I've had an experience just recently. Can I say the name? It's King's College. I'm not ashamed to say. I withdrew right away because I was really, I couldn't believe the standard of mm, uh, the quality was lacking. It was just like you said, you were being talked to, and I just felt like a cash cow. I felt like there was no care, there was no interest. It was just presenting material that had been presented for 20 years. And meanwhile, we've been through COVID, we've had different, uh, very illuminating experiences as far as mental health is concerned. So this is material that's 20 years old. And I was appalled at the lack of quality and at the arrogance, I must say, of thinking that, well, we can just get by with this minimal effort of yeah of giving something back to uh, a a community. And that's what I appreciate at Animas as well. Is I have the feeling that it's always cutting edge, right? The people that are presenting and the people that are there with me learning together, we keep each other on our toes. And it is this critical thinking that is encouraged as well, which I think is so important in every sense, in every area of life. Just don't ever take anything for granted or because some expert says it's so, you are allowed to question it and to think for yourself. Um, yeah.
And I would say from having I'm in a very lucky position of being both a delegate on some of the courses and also working behind the curtain with the Animas team, and the work that goes into putting those courses together, the thought, the consideration, and the expertise there in the back office team is incredible. And it's great to hear that reflects so well um, from your side as well. Uh, So as we start to draw our fantastic conversation to a close, I'm wondering what are you working on now, and what does the future look like for Pascal?
Ah, interesting, interesting. I'm working at still, as you said, I'm a translator also. So I'm still working on some wonderful projects that I'm very happy to have because with AI, which would be a completely new subject now, but it impacts every part of life. as a translator, of course, there are such fantastic programs out there that my profession is, well, it's going to die. It is, because you just don't need us anymore because machines can do it and they will continue to learn to do it better and better and better. So for certain areas of translation, you don't need a translator anymore, a live translator. And the same goes for coaching. Some people say, although I am completely opposed to that point of view, I think AI can never, ever, ever replace a human coach. So, what I'm working on right now is some wonderful translation literary projects that I still need to do, that a machine cannot do, because you need to feel the story, you need to connect with the narrator in a way that a machine cannot do it yet. Who knows? And on the coaching level, I am looking forward to the next Animas course, which starts in on my birthday, actually January 28th. So it's on mental health, which is the direction that I want to take, as I said in the beginning. Um, and a course that is actually um, that involves Bessel van der Kolk. So on trauma, that's coming up in, I believe, February. So lots of learning for me to do. And that's what I hope to be focusing on more and more in the future, is to coach with the mental health challenges in mind, um, and just have wonderful encounters with people, and yeah, and see, I have stopped making too many concrete plans, because my life has shown me that often it just doesn't work out the way you want it to. So I'm following my path, and just I'm looking forward to everything life brings to me.
Great to hear it, Pascal. And I'd second you on the AI. Sort of, it makes a great sort of brain, but a poor heart. It's very good technically, and it's a wonderful tool. It's really powerful, but it's it's quite heartless and soulless. A lot of the content it creates, and sometimes instantly recognizable as it's missing that human touch,
Yes, yes, yeah.
and it hasn't got
That
it
brings
yet.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yet, right, and I'm not sure it ever will, because that would tie me back right to the point I was making about empathy being, you know, is it possible to learn it? That the AI is a perfect example. If someone is sitting across from you and they're visibly frustrated, and the machine says, "Oh, I'm so sorry you're frustrated." Well, I don't know. I'm seeing that. I might think that, but are you really? And what's true for one person might not be true for another. So I might not be um it might not be useful if I'm if I'm mirroring the frustration, and that kind of distinction is very hard, if possible at all, for a machine to make. So there's got to be this human part that is so precious.
And hopefully it will remain, and we're not all replaced.
Yeah, no, no, not all. And who knows what new possibilities come out of it. It's always, I think my thing is, focus more on the usefulness, the positive aspects, rather than dwelling on the negative aspects. And I'm not saying put your head in the sand and don't look at that, obviously, but sometimes I feel that we would benefit from being a bit more positive and hopeful, even if it's very difficult to do so.
Thank you, Pascal. If someone's been listening and they've been inspired and they're interested to hear more, perhaps they want to ask you about some of what you've discussed, or interested in your coaching style, um, where can they find you, and how can they get in touch?
They can get in touch on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, and they can get in touch via my website. You'll find all the information on there. It's my company's name is called Creative Communication, and my website is my name, pascalemayer.com. And if you just Google that, you'll find me, and I'll be happy to talk
I'd
with you
recommend people give you a follow on YouTube, as you've been posting some really interesting content. Sorry, on LinkedIn.
on
Uh,
LinkedIn.
say, some
Sure.
interesting articles there on subjects such as the use of humor in coaching, and a really interesting one I read today on dream interpretation in coaching. So, content that you might not find anywhere else, yet. So, yeah, give Pascal a follow, and, no, it's been a lovely conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the channel. I have really enjoyed it, and it's given me a lot of ideas of some content of my own I'd like to write.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, David. It was lovely to be with you. And thanks for listening. I tend to go off on tangents, so I hope this wasn't too much of rambling going on. When I'm coaching, I'm usually very quiet. So
Well,
this
it's
was the
great. It's
opposite.
great to give, through my work, to give coaches a voice and an opportunity to speak without having to, withhold so much as we do.
Thanks again.